Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It is my pleasure and my privilege to be welcoming you. I think all my esteemed panel is here. I'm just, Miss Ameena is here, Mariam is here, Neha is here, Mohiyuddin Saab is here, Dr. Fareed is here. I think we're just missing Mr. Jacob, but he will be joining us later. Welcome to my esteemed panelists and the audience to the first panel discussion of the Pakistan Learning Festival being hosted within the Children's Literature Festival. The title of our panel is There Space for the Four C's? Creativity, Critical Thinking, Collaboration, and Communication, where we will be linking this to the proposed single national curriculum. My name is Camilla Hadi Chaudhary, and it is my privilege to be moderating this panel today. I am a second-year PhD candidate in education at the Faculty of Education at the University of Cambridge, where I am researching inclusion in education in Pakistan. I have been an educator for almost 10 years prior to this, and have also been actively involved in the arts and culture in Pakistan. I'm going to keep my role quite short because we're stretched for time. My panel is very esteemed, and I really want to have them give all of you the maximum time to speak and also to get as many Q&As. I will do a brief introduction of the topic that we are discussing. And then as I pose questions to each of my panelists, I will do a brief introduction of them. Now, mashallah, you all have such luminous careers and so many achievements under your belts that I have abridged your profiles because you have, because of in time. So thank you very much. And I have to say that I'm really, really excited to be and very honored to be hosting all of you today. So onwards. The government has proposed the single national curriculum as a measure to create equality within education so that regardless of socioeconomic status, Pakistan's children have an equal chance for social and economic mobility empowered by their education. This, to my mind, is a noble and necessary policy reform from the government. However, once it started, it became clear that the process of implementing a single national curriculum is far from straightforward, and several adaptations have had to be made in the government's thinking in response not just to feedback from educators in civil society, but their own thinking as well. Thus, the SNC or the single national curriculum is a vast topic. And the objective of today's panel discussion and my line of questioning is not to find a fix-all solution to its implementation. Rather, it is to pose and discuss a selection of issues concerning the national curriculum, the single national curriculum, that relate to the particular expertise of this very qualified and very knowledgeable panel. So with that, and without much greater ado, I would like to start the discussion. My first introduction is of Ms. Ameena Saiyid, who really almost does not need any introduction for anybody who has grown up in Pakistan. She has been a pivotal member of the education ecosystem in Pakistan. She is the founder and director of the Adab Festival, founder and managing director of Lightstone Publishing, and was the managing director of Oxford University Press Pakistan for 30 years, where she played a foundational role in building the corpus of publishing, both in Urdu and English. She serves on the boards of numerous local organizations promoting education in Pakistan, including Kashaf Foundation, Nasra Schools, Jinnah Society, and Habib University. She also supports the government on various education-related initiatives. She has and remains a forceful voice of change in thinking on education in Pakistan and the development of literacy and reading skill in our youth. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome her on the panel today. Ms. Saiyid, thank you so much for joining us today. My question to you as a person of letters is that can you talk us through the role of humanities in the curriculum? And how, in your view, the single national curriculum is going to fulfill or not fulfill that role? Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the generous introduction. Well, first let me just say what I understand by humanities. For me, it is very, it's a very wide meaning. Ranging from history, geography, literature, and also art, music. And I feel that yes, there is a general knowledge and a social studies curriculum, which also covers science and and geography and citizenship. Um, but basically, I want to talk about the curriculum. A curriculum is not such a prescriptive document. I find the SNC somewhat prescriptive. And I feel that the curriculum should be far more wide-ranging, more flexible. It should have very, general requirements. It should be a very wide framework of core knowledge and core skills and core processes that children learn. And today, actually, I was comparing it to the UK national curriculum, and I found that there were quite a lot of differences. Because, although I believe that it was consulted by the stakeholders, but instead of providing an outline of core knowledge around which teachers can develop exciting or stimulating lessons, I found it rather prescriptive. I know the subjects that are covered were very wide. Those subjects that included, social and cultural harmony and being a responsible member of society and of the global community, and also able to value human rights and democracy and such values, and even big values like truth, and which is all very commendable. And I think it's very good to expect that as the attainment targets, or as to be supported by the curriculum. However, I feel that what was missing, especially in the teaching of humanities, is the element of play and fun. I think that is absolutely essential for students, for children. Play is very serious matter, and we should not take it lightly. Children learn a lot while they are playing, and it is only through play that we can feed and capture their imaginations. Through play, through stories, through games, and I found that was missing in the single line. I can't say that it's entirely missing. They have some elements like show and tell, which is fun, and role playing, which I think children enjoy. But I think there should have been far more of emphasis, especially in the early years, I would say in primary school, in the pre-primary and primary school years, there should have been far more emphasis on playing. And what I also found missing, which I think is absolutely critical, is the role of reading. I think sufficient emphasis was not placed on reading books and stories, learning, because after all, what is our objective? Our objective is to make children into independent learners and to make them lifelong learners. And that is only possible if we make them into readers. Once they become readers, then they can access knowledge on their own. They can access it from newspapers, books, magazines, from attending seminars, or of course from the net. The idea is that they access knowledge from different sources and get exposed to all perspectives. It is only when they hear different viewpoints and are exposed to different ideas, they may be conflicting ideas, and then they process that information and then create their own ideas, create their own thoughts and their own opinions. And those opinions are their own. They're not received wisdom that they're repeating. So I feel that this curriculum will, I think we should somehow focus on getting children to read, become independent learners, enjoy learning, have fun in learning, expose them to different sources of knowledge, not limit them to given content, which I believe is being done in the Punjab, and so that will actually go against the spirit of the curriculum. So just to sum up, I'd like to say that the attainment targets also, two more things, the attainment targets and the medium of instruction. The attainment targets are again very, very specific. Whereas again, I think they should be more general and also special needs. I just want to very quickly talk about Special needs are mentioned in the curriculum for humanities, but they are sort of mentioned in passing. And usually the words that are used are provide them with access or support them in special needs. However, special needs is something very specific. We have to provide a code of practice for special needs. I mean, what are the special needs that children need? They need resources, they need equipment, they need special training, teachers. So that should be specified. The medium of instruction, of course, they can have, and Urdu is fine, but science and maths are being taught in English. And apart from English, I think there should have been some mention of how children can get additional support in learning English so that they can learn maths and science. And also science and maths have their own specific language. So that should be included in the curriculum.
Ms. Saiyid, sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you.
We have about 30 seconds. You're done? Okay, thank you so much. That was obviously very insightful and also very broad-based. So thank you for, and also highlighting some very specific measures that you brought in. And in fact, it leads me very nicely to my next panelist, who is Neha Raheel. I would like to introduce her. Neha works with the Citizens Foundation. She is an education professional with experience in teaching, teacher training, curriculum design, and qualitative research. She has a master's degree in education, culture, and society from the University of Pennsylvania, and she is a Fulbright scholar. She has experience teaching high school and university students in Pakistan and working in the development sector. She's currently, as I said, at the Citizens Foundation, where she is doing incredibly interesting and impactful work, designing classroom and assessment and students' learner experiences within the TCF schools that they're managing for the government in their public-private partnership schools. She is also a wise emerging leader 2020. So she's very wise. Neha, thank you so much for joining us today. My question to you is, can you tell us about how you implement the current national curriculum? So not the proposed single national curriculum, but the current national curriculum in the government schools that TCF is managing, and how you are planning to adapt to the new single national curriculum. What are the challenges that you expect to face, and also what opportunities that you are finding in the implementation? Thank you. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Camilla, and Assalamu alaikum to everybody. I'm very, very honored to be a part of this panel. I'll talk you a little bit through the interventions that we've designed for our public-private partnership schools. And just to give a background, these are about 350 schools that we've adopted from the governments of Punjab, Sindh, as well as KP in the respective provinces. And we've been operating them for a couple of years. So when we went into these schools, of course, the challenges of public education and of government schools, which are known to most of us in this community, were all prevalent. There was a lot of rote learning, there was a lot of teaching to the test, there was a lot of teacher-centered instruction. And when we saw that, we realized that one of the things which works in TCF's own schools, which are our flagship schools, is the creation, our entire training program, but also the creation of teacher guides. That's one way in which we supplement the curriculum, as well as in which we kind of impart our pedagogical approach. So that's one part. But one of the basic kind of beliefs with which we approached all of this was that we need to focus on social emotional learning, and we need to focus on, sorry, I think I'm being cut off. Okay, I'll go ahead. Right, so when we saw all of these realities, we decided that we had to design interventions that were based on the whole school approach with the aim of holistic child development. And under this, we've done a couple of things which we will continue to do even with the SNC, and I'll just at the end touch upon some of the opportunities that are available to us through the SNC as well. But one of the first things we did was we saw a lot of international frameworks, relevant practices, as well as our contextual needs. And based on that, we created a list of 12 skills that we divided into 4 categories: cognitive, social, self-development, and service skills, with the objective being that the success in the school, as well as in life beyond school, student well-being, as well as character development. And a lot of the research that we did spoke about the positive impact that focusing on SEL as well as larger student development has, not only on academic achievement, but also on pro-social behaviors and reducing the chance of antisocial behaviors. These students are also more likely to have positive attitudes about themselves, as well as a more growth mindset, and they have a higher chance of being employed later in life. So the question that we asked ourselves was, how do we build these skills into the learner's experience at school? Of course, the main kind of source available to us is academic opportunities. So we decided that we would infuse these skills within the lesson plans, within the teacher guides that we are developing. So we, for example, build in moments of metacognitive reflection. Humne kya seekha? Humne kis tarah seekha? Hum behtar kis tarah seekh sakte hain? To focus on the skill of akasi soch or reflective thinking. But then also on the same level, we also build in these skills through non-academic opportunities. So we redesigned the complete school schedule that we have. And we did this not only based on these skills, but also on detailed research that looked at children's attention span, how that varies across the day, across the year, across ages, across genders. And we introduced a lot of these SEL-based interventions. To give you an example of a few, we now begin the day with what we call Khair Makdam, which is a greeting that is led by the students. And then we sit together in circle time, which we call Aghaz, and we have open-ended discussions. And we end the day with a collective reflection called Jaiza, where we not only reflect on academics, maine aaj kya seekha, kis had tak seekha, but also on behavioral reflection. So maine aaj kitni dafa thank you kaha, ya maine agar mujhse koi galti hui to maine kis tarah respond kiya. And then we wrap up the day with self-affirmations and a goodbye. Apart from this, we also have set student development classes, which include, your games, your storytelling, but also something which we've introduced called Mera Time or Choice Time, where students play, and this is free play, where students get to choose how they want to play, what they want to play with, and we've given them access to toys and a couple of other resources. And the last way in which we're doing this is by creating a safe and supportive school culture. So we work a lot on student-teacher relationships, but we also work a lot on parent-school relationships and how we engage parents.
Sorry,
but at the same time,
Neha, I don't mean to interrupt you. You have about a minute and a half left.
Sure. So at the same time, if I go to the academic side, we've created these teacher guides, which will now also be tagged with the SNC. And what we have in these teacher guides is play and activity-based learning. So we've taken a lot of play-based learning as well as activity-based learning and contextualized it to our specific schools and our context. We've also borrowed very heavily from other international frameworks. So we borrow from the Understanding by Design framework, and we have essential questions in these classrooms, which signal to the learners that questioning, especially asking open-ended questions that go beyond the textbook, is critical to learning as well as to understanding. And then based on the attention span, we include brain breaks at different moments within the class. We include contextually relevant stories. We've revamped homework to now be homeschool connection, which is more deeper, more authentic. And we build in deliberately moments of meditation, mindfulness, yoga, physical well-being, and all of these other things. And these are happening all in our rural schools. So just to kind of go back to the SNC, one thing which I think that we still can continue to do is all of these things, right? We can still have our school schedule the way that it is. We can still have play-based activities and meditation-based activities, but the pressure again of all of these falls on the teachers and on the schools and on whether or not they prioritize this. To me, my reading of the SNC remains in the cognitive domain and doesn't necessarily go to the affective domain. So it signals to all stakeholders that cognitive is still greater than social emotional, that the acquisition for not for just the sake of still rote learning or still focusing just on the acquisition of skills and concepts is there, but not the purpose of moving beyond that and really truly questioning or having things such as the visible thinking routines that we've included. And I'll give you an example from math. Math is still very much about how we count, not why we count, or what the reason behind learning something like this is, or how we solve word problems. Why would you solve it this way and not that way? And there's countless other examples, and another one being from English, where we still talk only about naming and expressing emotions, not about understanding them, not about expressing them, not about dealing with them and processing them, which we do through our, like I said, meditation and mindfulness exercises, which are built in on a daily basis. So just to sum up, I think that there definitely is a lot of room within the SNC for all of these interventions that I've spoken about. But once again, to me, the burden falls on teacher training and on teachers rather than on this framework for education that could have signaled to us a lot more than what it does right now in terms of the affective domain and in terms of social emotional learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. That was so informative and so much, and so from a practitioner's perspective, it really adds value for those who are researching the point. And also, again, leads quite nicely to my next panelist, Professor Panjwani. Professor Panjwani has recently returned to Pakistan to take over as Dean of the Institute of Education at the Aga Khan University. He has arrived from previously being at the Institute of Education, I beg your pardon, Dean of the Institute of Education Development at Aga Khan University, and he has returned from the Institute of Education at UCL London, where he was the founding director of the Center for the Study of Education in Muslim Contexts. And the center was the first of its kind in any British university that dedicated to the promotion of critical research and scholarship on Muslim contexts. The list of his accomplishments is very long and geographically dispersed, but it is linked by a commitment to educational reform in low-income countries and Muslim societies. Professor Panjwani has a DPhil in Philosophy of Education from the University of Oxford and an MA in Education and International Development from the IOE at UCL and an MBA from IBA. It is my absolute pleasure, Professor Panjwani, to welcome you not only on this panel, but also back to Pakistan, where I think that your research is going to could be very systemic and have an important impact. And my question to you is going to build on actually the topic that seems to come out from the previous panelists about the curriculum being really a framework or an umbrella within which education delivery happens. So I would like to ask you, can you talk about the role of a curriculum in education conceptually, how it can be used and abused, and how can it develop education goals similar to what Neha was talking about creativity and critical thinking, but what are the sort of the pitfalls and how far can it be stretched in a way?
Great. Thank you very much, Camilla, for this introduction, and you and Bela for the opportunity to share some thoughts. I think this festival itself in some ways embodies the 4 C's that we are exploring here. So it's a great initiative. You have used a very interesting framework within the question, and that is of the use and abuse of the curriculum. We know that people have written about the use and abuse of history as well. So let me use this framework itself to talk about the ideas that I wish to share. I think there are 3 places where a curriculum can be used in a positive manner or can be abused. The first of these places is when the curriculum is created, when it is made. What is the curriculum? We should start with this. There are many types of curriculum. I mean, the one that we are talking about, single national curriculum, is essentially an intended or official curriculum. Then there's a curriculum that actually gets enacted in the classroom, which we call the enacted curriculum. Then there is also something called hidden curriculum. This is the things that students learn without teachers actually intending or knowing, but through other ways and arrangements that are there in the schools and teachers' behaviors and management and other aspects. We are talking about the intended or the official curriculum. I think one of the pithiest definitions of curriculum was given by Dennis Lawton, who said that a curriculum is a selection from culture. It's a selection from a culture. So, for example, if we take Urdu literature, we want to create a curriculum for Urdu literature, and we want to have prose and we want to have poetry. So we have everyone from Mir to Ghalib to Faiz to Manto to Shaukat Siddiqui. We have millions of things to choose from. The curriculum will refer to maybe 20, 30, 50. So the question is, who decides what goes into the curriculum? And that is a political decision as much as it is an educational decision. And that is an ethical decision as well. And if the signals that are given through this selection, whether they are regressive, intolerant, divisive, or whether they are progressive, tolerant, and inclusive, that itself can be a point, a place of use or abuse of the curriculum. So that's the first place where the curriculum can be used or abused. The second place is the examination, because the way examination is framed shapes, at least to some extent, how the teaching is done and how the curriculum is then viewed. But because the examination is by and large tied to the curriculum, it has its own place in it. And that's the second place where curriculum can be used or abused. The third place where the curriculum can be used and abused is really when the teacher engages with it and the teacher enacts it in the classroom. And I'm glad that the previous speaker was already emphasizing that, so let me dwell on this. A curriculum is a text. Like this event that we are having is a text, and any text lends itself to multiple interpretations. We can ask many questions about it. So the same text can be taught in many different ways. You can put a verse of the Quran or a couplet of the poetry or an essay, and the teacher can raise a variety of questions. So for example, suppose a curriculum is silent on special needs, or it's biased in gender representation. A good teacher can, in a way, subvert those things. And he or she can enrich the classroom through other materials. On the other hand, you can have a curriculum which is talking about special needs, which is quite balanced, egalitarian, and yet the teaching can undermine it. So it is very important to recognize that what the teacher does with the curriculum is what leaves far greater impression on the students than the text itself. So this is the third and the most important avenue. As we are talking about single national curriculum, and I think you would be able to find both the opportunities for creativity and criticality, but you would also find things that are perhaps limiting criticality and creativity. But ultimately, this will depend on how it is enacted in the classroom. And the role of the teacher becomes very, very important. If you engage with a Socrates, you are bound to experience criticality regardless of the text. And if the teacher is unable to think critically himself or herself, then even the Socratic dialogue would be useless in creating critical. So I would like to perhaps conclude by saying, वो जो इकबाल का शेर है ना कि मस्जिद तो बना दी शब भर में ईमा की हरारत वालों ने. So a curriculum making is like that. You made the curriculum in few months and it's like making that mosque. But जो वो आगे इकबाल कहता है, मन अपना पुराना पापी है, बरसों में नमाजी बन न सका. So वो जो नमाजी बनना या नहीं बनना है वो टीचर पे उसका सारा डिपेंड करता है. So I think it's important that while we talk about curriculum, we must not forget that the real game starts when the teacher takes the curriculum and takes the curriculum to the classroom. So let me end on the words of Jerome Bruner, who says that a curriculum is more for teachers than it is for the pupils. If it cannot change, move, perturb, inform teachers, it will have no effect on those whom they teach. If it has any effect on pupils, it will have it by having had an effect on teachers. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Farid, for that very interesting and illuminating thing. And I love the use of and the analogy of the Iqbal ka sonnet, because you're absolutely right. Until we change mindsets and towards the education, nothing will change. And also, I would like to now introduce Mr. Mohiyuddin Wani, who is a very important inclusion in our panel. Because he represents really the people, the government whose agenda is being created through the single national curriculum. And given the policy priorities and reforms that this government has initiated, he adds a critical perspective to our discussion. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Mohiyuddin Wani, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Federal Education and Professional Training. Mr. Wani, his work has also been closely affiliated with the reform measures being initiated in reform policy and curriculum. Mr. Wani, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. I could see from the camera that you really have a busy day and you're taking the time. So we really appreciate your insight and from, really from the government's perspective. So I want to repeat that the government has taken a really, to my mind, a very bold reform step by introducing a single national curriculum, something that really should have been from the start of the formation of Pakistan to create that equality. But as I identified at the beginning in my introduction, there remain critical areas of implementation bottlenecks, and two of which are, as Dr. Fareed and Ms. Ameena have also highlighted, is teacher training, and an implementation framework. So there are two aspects that I would like to discuss: teacher training and implementation, the guidelines to make the teachers understand how they have to implement that. Can you highlight a little bit and tell us about what the government's plans are for these two areas?
Again, thank you very much for inviting me and allowing me to share whatever I know in the ministry and being part of the whole reform process, which has been initiated a year back or maybe 18 months back. So I would like to, first I would try to, the starting point of the discussion is there is no silver bullet for any reform process. We have to start from somewhere, and it's very difficult to develop a consensus also, because if I consult people from Balochistan, from FATA, from GB, from AJK, everybody has different set of standards which they share, which they think is good for them based on the new constitutional framework post 18th Amendment. So first, it's difficult to first convince everybody that we must have common set of standards which should be applied in the single, not only single national curriculum, but in every education policy reform process. And again, I agree with you, teacher training and the whole implementation process itself is interlinked with the whole objective of developing a single national curriculum for people of Pakistan. And I again agree with Mr. Panjwani Sahab, when he said that manapna purana papi hai. So the process is means that it's not a single day process. It may take a decade or so but the issue is the right direction. If we are on the right direction, we are consulting those people who are educationists, who have developed expertise in this subject of education reform, school education, teacher training. We have to regularly consult them. And this whole education policy, which we are going to unfold in couple of months, teacher training and the implementation of teacher training and single national curriculum, is flexible. We can commit mistakes. Maybe there are gaps. So it's not a constitution which can't be amended. It can be amended on regular basis if we get new policy advice from all the stakeholders. And I would like to share that the answer of your questions is in the Pakistan Education Policy 2021, because it will have a very comprehensive roadmap of teacher training and the implementation framework regarding teacher training. I'll share a few projects in Islamabad, which are part of our public sector development program. Number one is education fellows. Here we have experimented through a project hiring private sector teaching professionals from the market on market salaries to work as teachers in our Federal Directorate of Education for 2 years. So, and their training is being done by a third party which is competing for these projects. So this is a unique example, a pilot, which can help us to make a comparison with the existing teachers which are otherwise recruited by the federal government through FPSC or Provincial Public Service Commission, with those who are recruited by a company, a service provider from the market, and they are going to teach the students, and then we will have comparison of a different standard of teaching teachers from the market. Secondly, we are also in the thinking of developing a national teachers training bureau in the new Pakistan education policy, develop standards and all the requisite skills which should be known to the teachers while teaching. And National Training Bureau will be manned by experts and not by civil servants or managers. It will be, the oversight will be by those people who are people of experience in the relevant field, and that will oversee the whole process. Thirdly, we are also planning, and it's being proposed, it's not a final decision, but planning of creating of district and provincial and federal education service cadres, like occupational, civil service occupational groups. Because what I have learned in the last 25 years of civil service, that if you are not part of the policy making management framework, nobody listens to you. So you have to develop, the teachers don't have, or those people who are educationists, they don't have that social networking or that capital where they can influence people for better decision making. They otherwise generate reports, good quality data and everything, but when it comes to the kill, they fail. For that reason, they need to be inducted into the policy formulation process through independent, like Pakistan Education Service and Provincial Education Services, where they are adequately trained also in the managerial skills. And those who are working in other civil service group, they should respect also, because they know now these are their competitors in the management cadres also. And we should have designated positions for them in different fields, in provincial education departments, in federal boards, in the universities, in every other field. So leadership positions will be more open to these teachers and academicians through this education service cadre. Lastly, we are also looking into this. COVID has basically exposed us to edtech solutions. Now, the students, they have more access to these edtech tutorials for their own benefit to the country also. And first year of online education maybe had a lot of hiccups and problems, but with the passage of time, it will be your core pillar of learning. So we have launched a project, blended learning project, where we are testing now this whole process in 20 selected schools of Pakistan. If it is proven successful, it will be, these edtech tutorials are an instrument of guidance for the existing teachers also, because people are investing heavily in these materials. So now the kids will have more choice to learn from their teachers, from these technology solutions. And one more project which we are going to launch in a couple of months maybe is offline edtech solutions, where because whenever you start, whenever you go for an initiative, usual suspects come out. ब्रॉडबैंड का मसला है, इंटरनेट का मसला है, उनका क्या बनेगा, इनका क्या बनेगा. So then we started hunting for those solutions which are not dependent on internet bandwidth. So we went for offline solutions also, and we are now going for a project also for 2,000 schools which are either in GB or southern Balochistan, where there are broadband issues, and we will apply these offline solutions for learning of quick learning of students. So multiple activities and strategies are being planned. We are seeking guidance from every segment of society, whether teachers, educationists, and like even going through the documents. Somebody was sharing the curriculum of UK. Nothing wrong in learning from the Indian curriculum also, because we have gone through the national education policy of India also. We have decided to include ICT education up to grade 8, so that making kids more digitally literate, allowing them to learn coding. So they because at the end of the day, the curriculum and the academics will be driven by AI. and the whole it's all about data now, and you have to learn data analytics. And if our neighbors and world at large is learning it, why shouldn't we? So we are doing that also. So there are multiple things going on. We are many are in the pipeline. We are seeking guidance. We have established a national curriculum review committee also over and above NCC, so that which are like many of the names are there, and who are either from MIT, from LUMS, from Boston, from locals and others. And we are now asking them to advise us whether the NCC is going on the right track, or whether the feedback received from all the stakeholders, whether it is being appropriately incorporated in the single new curriculum. So that's also being looked into. So these are my thoughts at this moment, and I would love to listen more to my colleagues. Thank
you, Wani Sahab. That was, I know that I have at least 3 questions of my own to ask. So I'm sure that the audience and other panelists will probably also, because like you said, you're in the hot
I never thought I'll be in the dock. I never thought I'd be in the dock.
I don't think it's in the doc. It's just so interesting to hear from, directly from the government, because there's obviously, as education researchers, we have a lot of questions. But I will come back to you, and I think there are people in the audience as well who have questions. But thank you and I would like to point out, I really appreciate you're going into specifics about what the government is planning and not generalities. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I would like to actually now move on to my dear Dr. Mariam Chughtai, who is the Associate Dean and Assistant Professor at the LUMS School of Education. And I am delightful to welcome her on this panel, given the range of her scholarship that I have followed and how much she has informed my own research. She is the director also of the Pakistan programs for Harvard University's Lakshmi Mittal South Asia Institute, and has taught at, goodness, it seems like lots of Harvard schools, at Harvard Graduate School of Education, Harvard Law School, and at the Kennedy School of Government. She has a doctorate in education, EdD from Harvard University, specializing in education policy, leadership, and instructional practice, and 2 master's degrees also from Harvard in international education policy and education policy and management, and a bachelor's in political science. Her forthcoming book that I am very, very eager to get my hands on, so Mariam, please remember me when it comes out, is on the politics of making and breaking identity through education in Pakistan. So Mariam, welcome to the discussion today. Since I am sort of very familiar with your PhD research and having read your thesis several times in my post, I want to talk to you about history and the teaching of history. The teaching of history, to my mind, is critical to our as a country, understanding our own identity, and for our youth to understand their own identity and what it means to be a Pakistani citizen. To that end, as Dr. Panjwani also very ably identified, it can, and in many things in the curriculum, can be manipulated, or in some cases may be abused to suit either political or ideological agendas. And there is evidence of this both, not only in Pakistan, but many other countries, including ongoing in countries like the UK and the US. And so it's probably actually more prevalent than not. So your work on the reproduction of history, as I said, has been very informative, linking it to the political agendas of the governments at the time and how it was projected and taught. So after a very long introduction, I apologize. My question to you is the following. Is the proposed single national curriculum inclusive enough to ensure that diversity is celebrated? And can you answer that in the context of history teaching, which to my mind has always been a somewhat ignored aspect of teaching in the metric system?
Thank you, Camilla. That's very generous of you to introduce me that way. So मैं आपको इससे पहले कि बताऊं कि अब इस वक्त हमारा जो निसाबी कुतब हैं वो क्या पढ़ा रही हैं, तारीख में कौन से सब्जेक्ट्स इंक्लूडेड हैं, जरा 1 मिनट के लिए जरा सोचें कि अब तक कितने अरसे तक, तकरीबन 3 दहाइयों तक हमारी तारीख जो बच्चों को किताबों में पढ़ाई जाती थी दरसी कुतब में, वो होती क्या थी। 1979 से लेके वेल इनटू 2006 में तो करिकुलम आया था, बट 2012 तक ऐसी किताबें पब्लिश हो रही थी, तो तकरीबन 3-4 दहाइयां जिसमें आप बच्चों को जो तारीख सिखा रहे थे उसमें सिर्फ 3 पॉइंट्स थे। पहले नबी करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम इस्लाम लेकर आए, फिर यहाँ पे महमूद गौरी सब कॉन्टिनेंट में इस्लाम लेकर आए और उसके बाद पाकिस्तान बन गया. This was a 3-point history that we were teaching students for a very long time. और हमारी हिस्ट्री मुकम्मल तौर पे एक रिलीजियस हिस्ट्री थी. आपने जो बात की कि एक बच्चा जो है वो अपनी आइडेंटिटी बनाता है टेक्स्ट बुक से, हिस्ट्री से, तो उसकी जो सोच है कि वो क्या इस दुनिया का बाशिंदा है, क्या इस मुल्क का बाशिंदा है, इस खित्ते का बाशिंदा है, क्या वो एक किसी इस्लामी रियासत जो कि मुख्तलिफ कंट्रीज की शनाख्त पे नहीं बेस रखती, क्या वो एक ट्रांसनेशनल मुस्लिम आइडेंटिटी का बाशिंदा है. तो ये सारी चीजें जो हैं, एक बच्चा जब एक तालीम जब स्कूल जाता है और किताब उठाता है और उसमें जो पढ़ता है उसके हिसाब से अपनी सोच को डेवलप करता है कि मैं कौन हूँ, हम कौन हैं, हमारे से बरक्स दूसरे कौन है, सेल्फ और अदर का कॉन्सेप्ट. तो अब जब सिंगल नेशनल करिकुलम में जो हिस्ट्री है, आपने इंक्लूसिविटी की बात की, इसमें सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट जो तब्दीली आई है वो ये है कि एक बच्चा अपनी शनाख्त एक ग्लोबल सिटीजन के तौर पे बना रहा है, एक मुसलमान या नॉन मुस्लिम पाकिस्तानी शहरी के तौर पे बना रहा है. वो अपने आप को एक बरसगीर का बाशिंदा भी समझता है और वो अपने आप को एक डिजिटल बाशिंदा भी समझता है. इसकी मैं आपको मिसाल इस तरह देती हूँ कि अभी जो मैंने आपको तारीख का बताया कि जो हमने तारीख पढ़ी थी जिसमें एक कम्प्लीटली रिलीजियस तारीख थी और वो भी बहुत सिलेक्टिव किस्म का नैरेटिव था, बहुत रिड्यूस्ड नैरेटिव था. इस वक्त जो 5वीं तक का निसाब बना है, 4वीं और 5वीं की सोशल स्टडीज की किताब में तारीख के चैप्टर्स होते हैं. मैं उस कमेटी पे भी उसका हिस्सा भी थी और मॉडल टेक्स्ट बुक्स की रिव्यू कमेटी का भी हिस्सा थी. उसमें आप स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं दुनिया की 3 बड़ी जो आपकी सिविलाइजेशंस थी, रोमन, ग्रीक और गंधारा. और हिस्ट्री एक ड्राई किस्म का सब्जेक्ट नहीं है. उसमें बताया कि गंधारा में उस जमाने में पेशावर का क्या नाम था और आज क्या नाम है. तो बच्चा जब देखता है कि आज मैं जहाँ रहता हूँ या पाकिस्तान के नक्शे पर आइडेंटिफाई करें कि टैक्सिला, मोइंजोदाड़ो, ये सारी साइट्स कहाँ पर हैं जो कि गंधारा सिविलाइजेशन की थी, तो बच्चा अपने आप को रिलेट कर पाता है कि मैं इस खित्ते से ताल्लुक रखता हूँ. फिर उसमें इतनी ज्यादा रिचनेस है बच्चे की इंटरेस्ट को ज़हन में रखते हुए ओलंपिक्स का ओरिजिन बताया गया है. उसमें उनके गंधारा में जो फिलोसोफर्स थे उनके नाम है, उधर का आर्किटेक्चर, कल्चर, फूड, क्लोथिंग उसके बारे में बताया गया है, ना सिर्फ गंधारा बट ग्रीक एंड रोमन सिविलाइजेशंस के बारे में. सिमिलरली जो इकोनॉमिक्स का चैप्टर है उसमें द हिस्ट्री ऑफ मनी के बारे, एवोल्यूशन ऑफ मनी के बारे में, कहाँ से स्टार्ट हुआ. तो एक हिस्ट्री का पर्सपेक्टिव मल्टीपल हिस्ट्री, ज्योग्राफी, सिविक्स के हिसाब से एक बच्चे की इमेजिनेशन को ब्रॉडन किया गया है. फिर इसमें एक जो मेन इशू आता है कि हमारी निसाबी कुतब अलोंग द लाइंस ऑफ जेंडर बहुत डिस्क्रिमिनेट करती हैं कि एक जो गर्ल स्कूल चाइल्ड है वो अपने आप को तारीख में देख ही नहीं पाती. वो किताबों में उसके बड़े स्टीरियोटिपिकल किस्म के रोल्स हैं. और जो किताबें बहुत अरसे तक पाकिस्तान में पढ़ाई गई उसके अंदर जो अहम शख्सियात लिखी जाती थी वो तमाम अस्करी मिलिट्री बैकग्राउंड्स की होती थी, जिन्होंने जंगें लड़ी हैं. 71-65 के वॉर हीरोज थे. अगर कोई खातून मेंशन थी तो रजिया सुल्ताना थी जो कि एक वॉर हीरो थी. तो ये मैं बात कर रही हूँ पब्लिक स्कूल टेक्स्ट बुक्स की जिन पर मैंने रिसर्च की है. तो अब जो किताब है उसके अंदर बहुत सारी ऐसी खवातीन का जिक्र है जो कानून साज रह चुकी हैं, जो सियासतदान रह चुकी हैं, जो एक आम शख्सियत हैं, जिसमें एक छोटी बच्ची अपने आप को भी देख सकती है. यहाँ तक कि जो इम्तिहान जो फॉर्मेटिव और समेटिव असेसमेंट के क्वेश्चंस दिए हैं बुक में, उसमें भी कहा है कि आप में कैसी कौन सी ऐसी 3 खूबियां हैं जिनकी बिना पर आप भी आम शख्सियत बन सकते हैं. अब एक बच्चे को अगर आप रट्टे सिस्टम पर डालेंगे तो उसको आप बस कंटेंट दे देते हैं कि ये याद करके रिप्रोड्यूस कर दो. लेकिन फॉर्मेटिव असेसमेंट का रूल ये है कि आप उसमें साथ साथ असेस कर रहे होते कि क्या बच्चे ने इस चीज को इंटरनलाइज किया है. बच्चे का असेसमेंट करने का मकसद ये होता है तशखीस की जाए कि उसको समझ आई है कि नहीं. तो जब आप ऐसा सवाल पूछेंगे जिसका जवाब किताब में नहीं है कि मेरे में 3 ऐसी क्या खूबियां हैं, तो उससे बच्चा उस कंटेंट को इंटरनलाइज करता है. मैं फाइनली एक एग्जांपल दूंगी कि आई विश ये किताब जो मॉडल टेक्स्ट बुक बनी, आई विश मैंने पढ़ी होती जब मैं छोटी थी. इसमें एक स्टोरी है, एक बच्चा है इस्लामाबाद के स्कूल में पढ़ता है, उसके 4 दोस्त हैं, एक क्रिश्चियन, एक ईसाई, एक चाइनीज और एक सिख. और वो 5 दोस्त मिल के बात करते हैं कि अब कौन कौन से त्यौहार आ रहे हैं और हमने एक एक त्यौहार किस तरह से मनाना है। और इस तरह से उस बच्चे को और उस किताब को पढ़ने वाले हर बच्चे को इस चीज़ का दर्स दिया जाता है कि हम एक इंक्लूसिव सोसाइटी में रहते हैं, एक डाइवर्स सोसाइटी में रहते हैं और तमाम त्यौहार हमारे लिए इक्वल रिस्पेक्ट के डिजर्विंग है। तो these are some of the changes that I have seen in the single national curriculum अभी तक जो प्राइमरी ग्रेड्स तक हुए हैं। मेरी उम्मीद है कि हुकूमत इसी वैल्यू सिस्टम के साथ आगे चलती रहेगी। और अभी क्लासेस 6 to 8 का करिकुलम बन रहा है, तो आई होप कि इसी के साथ हम आगे इसी वैल्यू सिस्टम को लेकर आगे चलेंगे।
Thank you, Mariam. That was really enlightening. और इससे अगर ये changes अगर आए तो इससे तो बहुत फर्क होगा. But I will come back to you with some questions because I think आए हैं इस पे. At this point, I'd like to move on to Miss Lubna Panjwani. So I would like to now actually turn to another aspect of Pakistan's education, just where we have touched a little bit in terms of language, but there has been a long-standing point of debate. It's not something necessarily that has come up in the SNC, but it has become more live in the discussions around the SNC. That is the teaching of languages, both as subjects and as medium of instruction. Given the variety of mother tongues spoken in the country, how languages are taught can change from being a tool of empowerment and uplift to one of exclusion and limitation, because those who don't know then get excluded out and it becomes a social barrier. And within this debate, the teacher of English is also particularly debated. Ms. Lubna Panjwani, our panelist, has a distinguished record as a proponent of English in the curriculum and learning English and speaking it correctly and being taught correctly. She serves as a director at Prowess, which is Panjwani Consultants and Center for Professional Development, and is a core member of SPELT and a consultant with Oxford University Press Pakistan and the Rotary Club. Ms. Panjwani, it is a pleasure to have you join us today, and I appreciate that you were the first panelist, I think, to join on. So thank you very much. It has been also very interesting reading up on your thinking on English teaching and watching some of the YouTube videos in where you have been making your presentations to people. So my question to you is this: within the single national curriculum, what do you see as the place of English? And should it be incorporated as a subject, or should it be more widespread and incorporated taught in other subjects? And I have two questions for you. That's the first part. The second part is, what kind of skills, resources, and trainings do teachers need to teach English in the most effective manner?
Okay. Thank you, Camilla. Thank you for the generous introduction. A slight correction, I have been associated with Oxford University Press for several years, but now I have my own consultancy firm. Thank you. I've been listening to all the panelists, and it has been a wonderful discourse up till now. Well, the medium of instruction has been a huge debate so far. One of my colleagues, Dr. Ahmed Mehboob, wonderfully describes it as we need to teach in the local language, which he terms it as boli. Boli mein padhao, boli mein zyada samajh aata hai. Lekin, again, having said this thing, realistically speaking, how far can we go with the boli when it comes to higher education? If we are going to go till the early years, all right, the things will help. But when you go to the higher education books, when you go towards, do we have the books in English? No. Do we have text in English? No. So what will happen? Just as Ameena said, just by teaching maths or social studies in English, are we going to help our students to understand the language? Until unless they have the environment there in the schools, will they be able to learn English? That's a big question, because the language is learned in an environment. Do we have that environment in the school? So that's my fear, number one. Number two, everybody has been talking about teacher competencies. No matter how good are the resources, until we don't know how to use them, until we don't know how to exploit them, we will not find the results. So in a very sweet and humble manner, I would just say that the government has tried to take a wonderful and a very bold step of introducing the single national curriculum. but it still needs to take another big leap of transformation. We need to transform our schools into the learning environment. In a very, what I would say, the education system needs to take another leap to give them a realistic environment where students can have a lifelong learning. Until that lifelong learning opportunities, which also is the part of the which SD4 is not there, I'm afraid they will not be able to learn that language the way we are talking about. Reading, writing, and critical thinking is missing altogether. They are there, but in a very superficial manner, I'm afraid. So that's what I'm going to say about this. I've answered both of your questions.
Thank you. Yes, you have. We have some follow-on questions, but
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question is to Mr. Peter Jacob, but I think we may have lost his connection. I'm not sure if is he there? Could somebody from ITA let me know? Because I don't.
So meanwhile, while we are waiting for Mr. Jacob, I would also like to ask about the IQ. How many IQ exercises are there in single national curriculum? Because that's the intellect, and we need to unlock the imagination part. That there is a gap. There's a huge gap between the text and the implementation part, and until unless that gap is not filled, we will not be able to make the difference.
I think, Ms. Panjwani, I think you've actually asked the burning question, which really everybody's comments have been circulating around, and my question to Mr. Wani was also that, and to which he responded that the implementation framework, which really should bring about the way to adapt and put it to use in the classroom, really it should be as detailed as possible. And in fact, I'm going to, I have the very interesting questions. While we wait for Mr. Jacob, perhaps we'll go on to the Q&A and then maybe come back to him. There's a very interesting question that has come on in the Q&A, and it is from Risham Najam. So she says, I am a director of Lahore Grammar School. I work directly in curriculum coordination and as a result in pedagogy. As a school system with arguably more resources than most, the expectation of a new curriculum from A to Z has caused a lot of confusion in our schools. As a practitioner, the first thing I look at and the last thing I look at before introducing any program is how much strain this will put on teachers and as a result on students. So my question is, why is the SNC not being piloted and introduced little by little? I would have liked to pose this question to Mr. Wani, but I think he's out of his desk. So I'm going to ask you, Dr. Chughtai, please, if you would care to answer that.
Certainly. देखिए, ये जो आपने सवाल पूछा ना, ये सवाल बहुत important सवाल है, और ये सवाल you have to understand across the spectrum ये concern है. जैसे कि जो मदारिस ने, जिन्होंने, जिस तरह आप कह रही हैं कि I am going to fill in some gaps, I'm not assuming आप ये कह रही हैं, एक major change जो आ रहा है वो language of instruction का आ रहा है. अब आपने class 4 और 5 में सोशल स्टडीज की बजाय माशरती उलूम उर्दू में पढ़ानी है, तो टीचर को एकदम से उसको एडजस्टमेंट करनी है, वो इट्स अ रियल एडजस्टमेंट. लेकिन साथ ही अगर आप देखें तो मदारिस में उन्होंने साइंस, मैथमेटिक्स, इंग्लिश, ये नहीं कि उर्दू से अंग्रेजी में पढ़ानी है, पहली दफा जिंदगी में पढ़ानी है. बहुत सारे मदारिस में 40 लाख बच्चों ने ये पहली दफा पढ़नी है. तो ये आपका सवाल, इस पे सबसे पहले मैं इसको जरा ब्रॉडन करूंगी कि ये टीचर्स का कंसर्न सिर्फ एलीट प्राइवेट स्कूल्स का नहीं, सिर्फ उन स्कूल्स का नहीं जिनके पास बहुत रिसोर्सेज हैं, बल्कि अक्रॉस द बोर्ड बहुत सारे स्कूल्स इस चीज पर कंसर्न है और लेजिटिमेटली कंसर्न है. अब दूसरा इसमें ये है कि इसको कितना टाइम लगेगा. मुझे बहुत लोग पूछते हैं कि आपने निसाब तो बना दिया, इसको कितना टाइम लगेगा. देखिए, तालीम का शोबा जो है ना, ये कोरोना वायरस की वैक्सीन नहीं है कि लग गई तो काम खत्म. पोलियो के कतरे नहीं है कि एक दफा पिला दिए तो काम. तालीमी निजाम में तब्दीली एक जनरेशन में आती है. अगर इसी मोमेंटम के साथ नो मैटर कौन सी सियासी पार्टी आपकी हुकूमत में होती है, तो 3 हुकूमतें लगेंगी कि ये निसाब इन इट्स स्पिरिट इम्प्लीमेंट भी हो सके. तो इसका ये सोचना कि आपने निसाब बना दिया लेकिन अभी तो कुछ हुआ नहीं, टीचर्स कैसे करेंगे, ये बिल्कुल सही है, लेकिन इसमें एक प्रोसेस लगेगा, इसमें बहुत टाइम लगेगा, 10 से 15 साल लगेंगे. मदारिस ने बड़ा अच्छा नेगोशिएट किया गवर्नमेंट से. उन्होंने कहा हमें 5 से 6 साल आप देंगे
to make this adjustment. تو کیا یہ elite private schools government کے ساتھ negotiate نہیں کر سکتے کہ ہمیں 5 سے 6 سال آپ دیں گے to make this adjustment؟ لیکن سارا فوکس اس پہ ہے کہ یہ ہو کیوں رہا ہے rather than کہ یہ اچھا ہو رہا ہے اور ہم نے how are we going to work with the system to get along. دیکھیں اگر آپ language policy is always tricky, language policy میں سب کو خوش کرنا بہت مشکل ہے, لیکن ہم ایک ایسے خطے سے تعلق رکھتے ہیں جہاں پہ ہم ملٹی لنگول بچے, ملٹی لنگول اڈلٹس رہتے ہیں اور ایجوکیٹ کر سکتے ہیں. تو اگر آپ کے اسکول آپ کو اپرچونٹی دے رہے ہیں کہ آپ کے بچے ملٹی لنگول ہوں, نہ صرف انگلش بولیں بلکہ اردو بھی بولیں, نہ صرف سندھی بولیں بلکہ انگلش بھی بولیں, تو what is wrong with that? And I think that the challenge of teachers is absolutely real and legitimate, but it needs to be figured out. It needs to be worked on rather than and it has been piloted, by the way. جو یہ سوال ہے کہ کیا یہ نصاب کو پہلے پائلٹ نہیں کیا, 2006 کا جو نصاب ہے وہ کئی سالوں سے 14-15 سالوں سے چل رہا تھا. یہ نصاب بہت حد تک اس سے ملتا جلتا ہے, اس میں اپڈیٹس ہیں, اس میں انکلوژن ہے, اس میں کچھ ایسی چیزیں ہیں جو اس وقت کی ڈیمانڈ تھی. مثلا ڈیجیٹل سٹیزن شپ جو 2006 میں اتنی بڑی ڈیمانڈ نہیں تھی. پبلک اسکولز میں اراؤنڈ دا کنٹری یہ نصاب ٹرائیڈ اینڈ ٹیسٹڈ ہے. تو یہ بات بھی میں اس کو کاؤنٹر کروں گی کہ یہ کیوں پہلے کیوں نہیں کیا, اس کو فیز آؤٹ کیوں نہیں کیا. یہ باقاعدہ فیزڈ آؤٹ ہے. ہاں, it is a change, there will be loss, but we have to work together to figure it out.
Mariam, actually, Risham has a follow-on question to you. Well, not to you or to anybody really who knows, which is that they've been told that they don't have the option of going slow. And is that just a miscommunication, do you think? Or is it something that perhaps the government doesn't necessarily want schools to take that option too slow?
دیکھیں پرائیویٹ اسکولس کے پاس ایبسولوٹ آپشن ہے. جو پبلک اسکول میں بچہ پڑھتا ہے نا, وہ 5ویں کا امتحان دیتا ہے, وہ 8ویں کا امتحان دیتا ہے, وہ 10ویں کا امتحان دیتا ہے. لیکن آپ اور میں جس قسم کے پرائیویٹ اسکول میں پڑھے, ہمارے لیے 4تھی کا امتحان 5ویں کا 6ٹھی کا برابر ہی تھے. اسکول ڈیسائیڈ کرتا تھا کس کو آگے پروموٹ کرنا ہے, کس کو نہیں پروموٹ کرنا, کس کو فیل کرنا ہے. ٹھیک ہے نا. تو اور پرائیویٹ اسکولس کو اجازت ہے وہ ایڈیشنل مٹیریلز یوز کرنا چاہیں تو وہ کر سکتے ہیں. جس طرح میں یہی کہنا چاہ رہی ہوں کہ آپ اکیلے نہیں ہیں اس پروسیس میں کہ آپ پہ صرف ایلیٹ پرائیویٹ اسکولس کو ٹارگیٹ کیا جا رہا ہے. یہ ایڈجسٹمنٹ پورے نیشن میں ہو رہی ہے, تو اٹس فائن, اس میں ایڈجسٹمنٹ میں ٹائم لگے گا. ہاں, جو پبلک اسکول میں بچہ پڑھتا تھا جس نے 5ویں کا امتحان دینا تھا, اب اسے پہلی دفعہ یا انگریزی میں دینا پڑے گا, یا وہ ریجنل لینگویج میں پڑھتا تھا, اب اس کو ایڈجسٹمنٹ, اس کے لیے ایک ہائی اسٹیکس ایگزام ہے. اور وہ بھی بائی دا وے پنجاب گورنمنٹ نے, پنجاب ایگزامینیشن کمیشن نے 5ویں کا امتحان ختم کر دیا. میرے 3 ایم فل اسٹوڈنٹس نے 1 سال اس پہ ریسرچ کیا ہے. تو یہ ہے نا کہ ہمیں ایڈجسٹ کرنے کا ٹائم نہیں مل رہا. آف کورس ٹائم مل رہا ہے. آپ پرائیویٹ اسکول چلاتے ہیں, آپ جس طرح مرضی پروموٹ کریں بچوں کو, آپ ان کی اسیسمنٹ جس مرضی بیسس پہ کریں.
Sorry, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I'm not sure who's...
I can hear you.
I think we may have been hacked. Can ITA just please look into this? I'm not sure who Najaf, I'm not sure who this person is who's joined in. So we have another question coming up. What support, actually this is a good time for Mr. Mohiyuddin to join us again. Mohiyuddin Saab, the question I have audience say, what support has been given to the schools to implement these changes? Are more budgets being allocated to them? For example, Dr. Mariam mentioned digital literacy. Will schools be given laptops and other resources accordingly? And actually میں اس کوشچن پہ تھوڑا بلڈ کروں گی آپ ہی کے لیے محی الدین صاحب, کہ واٹ اباؤٹ جو آپ نے کہا تھا کہ آپ آف لائن جا رہے ہیں, تو وہ ایک تو ہوتا ہے کہ ہم ایک براڈلی ایک ڈیجیٹل لٹریسی کریٹ کریں, لیکن اس میں انیکوالٹی کا جو رول ہے دیٹ وہ اٹ کین بیکم ایون مور پرابلمٹک, بیکاز یس یو کین سے کہ بلوچستان میں ہم دے رہے ہیں ٹو اسٹوڈنٹس ہو ڈونٹ ہیو براڈ بینڈ ایکسیس, بٹ واٹ اباؤٹ دا لوئسٹ طبقہ? What about the ones who may have broadband but don't have the resources to get broadband? Are you supporting schools to provide access to the digital literacy? You're on mute, sir.
Sorry, one of the summary which we have sent to the Prime Minister first, کہنا چاہتا ہوں نا کہ सिल्वर बुलेट नहीं है, वी आर गोइंग बिट्स एंड पीसेस जहां जहां जितनी रिसोर्स एलोकेशन हो रही है. सो हमने समरी प्रपोज की है टू गिव लो interest or loans to low-cost private schools, starting from there. Plus, we are going to invest a lot of money in ICT schools, GB, AJK, जहाँ पे इंटरनेट कनेक्टिविटी के इश्यूज भी हैं. दूसरी बात ये है कि ये जो इंटरनेट एक्सेस का और स्कूलों को सपोर्ट करने का इशू है, ये 3 से 5 साल का रोड मैप है. कांट बी डन इन 1 ईयर. ठीक है, उसमें हम इंक्रीमेंटली जाएंगे और नए जो प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं हम लेस इन ब्रिक एंड मॉर्टर एंड मोर इन टेक्नोलॉजी, ताकि आप ब्रिक एंड मॉर्टर में जाते हैं क्योंकि हमारे पास रोज ये एप्लीकेशन आती हैं, इसको अपग्रेड कर दें, इसको अपग्रेड कर दें, बने अपग्रेड कंट्रैक्टर ड्रिवन डेवलपमेंट. जरूरत नहीं है वहां पर भी आप अपग्रेड किए जा रहे हैं और पैसा सारा बिलियंस का वहां खर्च हो जाता है. टेक्नोलॉजी में इन्वेस्टमेंट की कॉस्ट कम है लेकिन आउटपुट ज्यादा है. वी आर ट्राइंग आवर लेवल बेस्ट के जो नए प्रोजेक्ट्स आए वो टेक्नोलॉजी ड्रिवन हो और सॉफ्ट कंपोनेंट ज्यादा हो, ट्रेनिंग पे ज्यादा इन्वेस्ट हो, HR की इंडक्शन की स्टैंडर्ड्स पे ज्यादा इन्वेस्ट हो, ब्लेंडेड लर्निंग पे ज्यादा इन्वेस्ट हो, और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में भी जहां पर जरूरत नहीं है वहां पर जबरदस्ती के ना क्रिएट किए जाए, जरूरत के मुताबिक, और जो पैसा वहां से सेव हो वो उसकी क्वालिटी पे. बिकॉज जो हमारा मोटो है कि इक्वालिटी, इक्विटी, एक्सेलेंस एंड देन एक्सपेंशन. पहले अब एक्सपेंशन बहुत हो गई है, तो पहले आपने इक्विटी को एड्रेस करना है और एक्सेलेंस को एड्रेस करना है. एंड लास्टली आपने, चूंकि ये स्कूलिंग है तो आगे की तरफ लिंक्ड ही, यू हैव टू गो फॉर एम्प्लॉयबिलिटी आल्सो. So lot of factors are contributing, looked into towards developing this educational policy. जो पूरी educational policy का framework है उसमें education financing is a key component. What we are suggesting कि जो अभी टेक GDP रेशो के साथ education की funding को assess किया जाता है, ये भी गलत है. What we are proposing, what I say proposing, अभी draft अभी approved नहीं हुआ, but the thing is कि आपका जो PSDP और annual development program है, इसका कितना परसेंट आप एजुकेशन पे इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं, दैट्स द की इशू. अभी तक होता यह है कि आपकी सैलरीज ऑटोमेटिकली रेज हो जाती है, पता चलता है बजट इतना बढ़ गया, ग्राउंड पे इम्पैक्ट जीरो होता है. सैलरी कंपोनेंट के अलावा जो डेवलपमेंट का बजट है, जब तक उसमें इन्हांसमेंट नहीं होगी आपका इम्पैक्ट नहीं आएगा. तो हम ये कह रहे हैं कि PSDP का अगर 700 बिलियन है तो कितना आपने एलोकेट एजुकेशन के लिए किया है, और वो एलोकेशन जो सैलरी साइड पे ना हो, जो टेक्नोलॉजी साइड पे हो, इक्विपमेंट साइड पे हो, ट्रेनिंग साइड पे हो, रिक्रूटमेंट की साइड पे हो. हम उस तरह की इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहेंगे और ब्रिक एंड मॉर्टर मिनिमम करना चाह रहे हैं. तो ये हम क्राइटेरिया बेंचमार्क रखेंगे गवर्नमेंट की परफॉर्मेंस का, कि कमिटमेंट का टुवर्ड्स एजुकेशन, PSDP और ADB की एलोकेशन का. और सेकेंडली जो एलोकेशन है उसके अभी प्रोसेस को ज्यादा कंसल्टेटिव और पार्टिसिपेटिव किया जाए. ये ना हो कि दफ्तर में बैठ के मैंने 25 डेवलपमेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स बना लिए हों और वो कल लॉन्च हो जाएं. इट हैज टू बी, the proposals have to be elicited from the public कि आप बताइए हमारा नेक्स्ट बजट आ रहा है जून में, आप बताइए मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एजुकेशन या प्रोविंशियल एजुकेशन डिपार्टमेंट डेवलपमेंट साइड पे एजुकेशन के कौन कौन से प्रोजेक्ट्स में पैसे एलोकेट करें. तो आप हमें बेहतर गाइड कर सकेंगे. हमारा तो एक व्यू पॉइंट होगा ही होगा. हमारा 90% व्यू पॉइंट हमें जो फीड किया जाता है सिस्टम में वो ब्रेक एंड मॉर्टर होता है. सर ये स्कूल अपग्रेड कर दें, इसमें इतने कमरे बना दें, इसके ये बात, मिसिंग फैसिलिटीज तो सबसे बड़ा एक फ्रॉड है जिसमें पता ही नहीं चलता पैसा कहाँ खर्च हुआ और कहाँ हो गया. तो आप लोगों, हमने मिनिस्टर को एडवाइस किया है कि हम पब्लिसाइज करें कि नेक्स्ट ईयर का बजट हम लेने को जा रहे हैं. हमारी मिनिस्ट्री है एजुकेशन प्रोफेशनल ट्रेनिंग, तो वी नीड इनपुट फ्रॉम द पब्लिक सेक्टर कि हमें स्पेसिफिक गोल्स ना बताएं, स्पेसिफिक प्रोजेक्ट आइडेंटिफाई करके भी दें. जरूरी नहीं है कि वो एग्जीक्यूट आप करें, एग्जीक्यूट हम करें, बट इट समथिंग इज हैपनिंग व्हिच इज गुड, एवरीबडी हैज द ओनरशिप ऑफ इट. तो ये भी हम अपनी वेबसाइट पे डालेंगे कि डेवलपमेंट प्रोसेस को भी कम्युनिटी लेवल पे इसकी इनपुट ली जाए. वेबसाइट पे डालेंगे, मीडिया में पब्लिसाइज करेंगे, वो भी एक प्रायोरिटी को हमारी रिफ्लेक्ट करेगा, हमारे इंटरेस्ट को रिफ्लेक्ट करेगा.
یہ تو بہت ہی قابل تعریف بات ہے بیکاز یہ کبھی گورنمنٹ نے کبھی ایسی کوئی پولیٹیکل ہینڈ جس کو ہاتھ بڑھائے کبھی میرے ایٹ لیسٹ میرے ایکسپیرینس پہ تو کبھی نہیں ہاتھ بڑھایا ہے. اب ہمارے ایک بہت انٹرسٹنگ کویسچن آیا ہے Q&A میں جو کہ آئی ووڈ لائک ٹو ایڈریس ٹو. تھینک یو وانی صاحب, بہت آپ نے بہت ہی انفارمیٹیو جواب دیا ہے. اور لیکن یہ کویسچن بھی بڑا کریٹیکل ہے, یہ میں ڈاکٹر فرید کو ایڈریس کروں گی. Nasreen Iqbal writes, can we not include compassion as the fifth most important skill for learning for this century? Communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity we need, but thinking of other things like kindness, empathy. And she gives the example that what is communication without empathy and compassion, and what outcome will it have? Dr. Fareed, I would like you to answer this, but I would also like you to answer this in the context of the religious curriculum that has come out very recently for minorities, because that is a major step towards inclusivity and empathy.
Great. Thank you. I think this is an extremely important point in question because अक्सर हम इसको भूल जाते हैं. हम skills और dispositions और knowledge की बात करते हैं, लेकिन ये भूल जाते हैं कि human relations and how do we act towards others and care we show towards others is very, very important part of living together. तो in fact मेरी अपनी क्लास में अपनी writings में I've talked about 3 C's. उसमें the third C is care, because I think care for oneself, care for the environment, care for the other is equally important. So आप उसको care कहें, compassion कहें, I think this is very, very useful to do. This takes me back to the points Ameena was mentioning about the humanities. क्योंकि humanities आपको बहुत help करता है, history भी help करती है, literature भी help करती है, empathy create करने में, because ये आपकी imagination को develop करती है. और imagination के बगैर it's very difficult to put yourself in another person's shoes. That's what empathy is, to put yourself in another person's place. अच्छी teaching of literature, अच्छी teaching of history can help us do that. तो I think इसको करने का, क्योंकि आप directly तो you can't say कि care develop हो जाए compassion. You have to do it pedagogically. Pedagogically, humanities can play very important role. एक चीज और मैं इसमें ऐड करूं जो आपके दूसरे सवाल से लिंक्ड है, ये बिल्कुल मेरे ख्याल में बहुत ही अच्छी चीज हुई है कि we have developed a textbook in which religions other than Islam. I think we have to find a better way to articulate, because it's no point saying non-Muslims या non-Islamic, because उसमें इस्लाम को फिर भी आप सेंट्रल बना रहे हैं. You have to find a language जो कि उनको इक्वल उस पर बात कर सके. तो ये बहुत अच्छी डेवलपमेंट है, इसकी टीचिंग अच्छी तरह से होनी चाहिए, एंड दैट विल हेल्प. मैंने नोट किया, मरियम ने भी इसको जिक्र किया था कि किस तरह से हम ये एक टॉलरेंस, और सिर्फ टॉलरेंस नहीं बल्कि हमें प्लूरलिज्म की तरफ जाना चाहिए कि हम उस डाइवर्सिटी को सेलिब्रेट करें, उसको एक्सेप्ट करें और देखें कि ये डाइवर्सिटी हमारे लिए स्ट्रेंथ है, हमारी कमजोरी नहीं है. अक्सर हमारी डाइवर्सिटी को हम वीकनेस की तरह प्रेजेंट करते हैं और हम उसको कंट्रास्ट करते हैं यूनिटी के साथ, लेकिन आई थिंक यूनिटी और डाइवर्सिटी दोनों साथ चल सकती है. सो आई थिंक इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, पर वी शुड कंसिडर हियर एज वेल कि 4 C's के साथ 5 C's, कंपैशन कहें या केयर कहें, वो उसके साथ जरूर ऐड करें.
Thank you very much, Dr. Panjwani. जी मोहियुद्दीन साहब बोलिए.
मैं आपको इंटरजेक्ट करूंगा. The day I joined Ministry of Education in Islamabad, I'm a student of Islamabad public schools. So I've great ownership of these schools. So the first thing I did कि मैंने यहाँ पर इन फेडरल डायरेक्टरेट ऑफ एजुकेशन, अब मैं टीचिंग की साइड पे नहीं आ रहा, मैंने कहा पहले स्टेट तो केयर को इस्टेब्लिश करे विद टीचर्स. तो मैंने कर्टसी कमेटीज बनाई डायरेक्टरेट ऑफ एजुकेशन और प्रिंसिपल में. अब कर्टसी कमेटीज क्या करती हैं? पहली बात मैंने कहा जो टीचर रिटायर होता है वो सबसे ज्यादा बेतौकीर किया जाता है. बिफोर रिटायरमेंट 3 महीने पहले उसके पेंशन, उसके सारे स्टाफ, इट शुड बी प्रिपेयर्ड. In case of his illness, the principal, the staff, they must reach out to him. In case of death, uski family ko look after till the, like, jo uske bachche 18 ke ho jaye, they should be supported by the institute. We have notified them. These, तो जब उस्ताद को पता चलेगा कि स्टेट उसको लुक आफ्टर कर रही है और रिस्पेक्ट वैसे ही दे रही है, इस तरह फौज देती है, आप उसको सेलिब्रेट करते हैं, उसकी रिटायरमेंट को, उसकी रिक्रूटमेंट को, उसकी प्रमोशंस को, और उसका हक उसको डोर स्टेप पे प्रोएक्टिवली देते हैं. That's again, वो आगे भेजेगा बच्चों के लिए. अगर एक उस्ताद ही इत्मीनान से महरूम होगा, जब उसको केयर कोई नहीं होगा, उसको उसकी रिवॉर्ड नहीं मिलेगा, इंसेंटिव्स नहीं मिलेंगे, प्रमोशन टाइम पे नहीं मिलेगी, तो आप कंपैशन क्यूब भी कर लें, C3 भी कर लें, कुछ भी नहीं होगा. it has a trickle down effect. We have to look after the teachers, and then we will expect the teachers, they will have a compassionate view, and they will teach compassion and care to their students.
जी मोहिनी साहब आपने बिल्कुल बात सही कही है. I'm afraid I have many burning questions for all my panelists, particularly Miss Ameena and Miss Panjwani and Neha, but I have been told that we have run out of time. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to this panel. Thank you for the privilege of being your moderator. Thank you for allowing me to ask the questions that I did, and thank you for
one more thing. You can share my cell number with everybody. You can reach out to me. बाद में भी information लेना चाहें, कोई document देना चाहें, more than welcome.
I will leave that to Bela to organize, but I'm for my part, thank you very, very much for all the information and all that knowledge that I have learned. And the questions to the audience that the audience has posed, you can send them via email, and ITA will process them to the panelists. बहुत shukriya, and inshallah we will see changes in the next coming years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Camilla. That was a wonderful session. The only thing I would like to say as a final comment is that सारे अंग्रेजी पढ़ाने वाले सिर्फ private school के लिए नहीं होते. Our heart goes out for 90% schools there, which are the government schools. We are more worried about them than the private schools.
Right.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for moderating the panel today. We would like to thank you for participating with us and joining us live and on the venue. And we also want to thank our partners, British Council, Children Library Complex, there's Oxford University Press, and Room to Read, and our very own ma'am, Miss Villa Raza, for helping us create this event. Thank you so much for joining. And just one last thing, if you can just go online to our Facebook page at Children Literature Festival, or in the current Zoom link, we are sharing a survey. If you can fill that out, take a minute and let us know what you think about what's happening. If you have any feedback, that would be a big help to us. So it's Khudafaz from us, and see you guys tomorrow. I think.
Miracle, sir.